Hello, welcome into the second episode of Season 2 of the On the Rim podcast presented by Heartland Continent Hoops. It's me, Elliott. We're back. It's March update time. A month ago, we did the February update, kind of updated what was going on in the league, and now it's time, end of March here, coming up in April. It's about a month and a bit until the season starts on May 9th between the Stingers and the Sea Bears, and so we gotta figure out what's going on in March, what's happened here in the league. It's been a little bit of a busier month in terms of signings, a few more for last month, 17 this month in fact, compared to 13 for last month. But teams have started to take shape. There's directions being taken in terms of how you see the rosters are building, and so it's getting to be that point in time where teams are really starting to come together, and it's becoming apparent who might be favorites early on here, and we're going to get into that later on in the episode. But just a little bit of a few housekeeping things in terms of other things that have happened in the league, because we're going to jump right into it this week. When it comes to other things in the league, the CEBL announced just a few days ago that they have now changed the draft format again for this year. It is now, instead of there being a draft of 3 rounds, there's now a draft day. I'm going to get more into it. There's going to be a video coming up next week where I'm going to explain more of that and kind of how the new system works versus the old one and what I like and dislike about it, just because I think that's a longer topic, and I think that there's some things that the league can do to improve on the draft format while also making the league better and a little bit more accessible for young Canadians, and specifically young Canadians to join and play in the league rather than just trying to sign, or even the format from years past. So we're gonna get into that in next week. There will be a video dropping sometime early that'll talk more about that. So let's get right into the coaching changes. So we had 2 more coaches announced. So we essentially have all but one team seems to have announced their commitment in terms of a head coach. So we're up to 9 teams now. The Scarborough Shooting Stars are currently the only team who does not have a head coach that has been announced, or trying to say that somebody's coming back or whatnot. So we'll see where that goes. But they're normally a team that kind of does a lot of their work late, like mid to late April. So we'll see if any of that changes. It might even change as of tomorrow. You never know. But the Saskatoon Mamba, who formerly the Saskatchewan Rattlers, have announced their head coach. So we'll go over Isaiah Fox first. Both of these coaches that have signed, they have some experience in terms of coaching at the G League level. Perry Huang, who I will get to, who the Calgary Surge brought in, has some experience with the WNBA. But for Fox, he was the G League Next Up Game head coach for this year. He's won a few cups with different teams in the G League. He's a current associate head coach with the Salt Lake City Stars. So he has a lot of experience, but both of these, and we'll get into a little bit more with Perry Huang, both coaches have been touted as their player development coaches, and they're more about building culture, which I find interesting, especially when it comes to Calgary. But for the Mamba, I think it's really important that they bring somebody in that hopefully can continue to come back year after year and is willing to build some sort of culture, because they just don't have anything right now with new ownership. That needs to change. So hopefully Fox can do that. He seems like he should be the correct man for the job in terms of what the Mamba are hoping to do in 2026. And so I mentioned him already, but Perry Huang, he will now be the head coach of the Calgary Surge, and it did sound like the Surge were anticipating that their coach from last year, who was Caleb Canales, was going to be returning. And so I also don't know where that stood, because obviously he was coming off a season coaching in the G League, Canales was, and then he coached in the CEBL, and then I do not remember if it was over the summer or at some point he got the position with the Troy Trojans, and then obviously the Troy head coach has now left, and so currently right now if you go to the Troy coaching staff for their basketball program. They only have their new head coach that they have hired and no other assistants. And so I'm not too familiar with what's going on there. So I'm assuming with the statement from the Surge that apparently Canales has many different responsibilities in terms of what's happening with the Troy Trojans or University of Troy, that he was not going to be returning. So that meant that the Surge were in the market for a new head coach. And so they hire Perry Huang, who is the current G League assistant coach for the South Bay Lakers. And, again, it's another guy who I'm surprised that they want to bring somebody in who's more about player development and building a culture, because you had, Canales built a culture for you. He had built a really good team, and so I'm not really too sure what's going on there. And again, I think because of the turmoil in terms of coaching and who's going to be coach and GM, I do not remember off the top of my head if Canales was also GM, but the Surge have not signed anybody, nor have the Mamba. So now that they have coaches or they've at least announced the coaches, hopefully they're now working on who's going to be hopefully on their rosters, because like I said on the top, we're a month and a bit out. You should already have a good chunk of your roster. Now again, Scarborough does this every year, so I'm not too concerned about them. But when you're the Surge, the Mamba, especially the Mamba, you should be trying to get fans excited for the new season and want to come and pay tickets, pay money to come and get tickets for games, because you just don't have a big enough fan base right now, and you also just need to build some sort of drum up some sort of hype for the season, because there just really isn't any right now. So at least for Calgary's sake, I'm assuming they've been able to get players no matter what, so I'm sure that they will be able to bring players in. I don't believe somebody like the Bandits, head coach and GM Cal Julius made a post on the Bandits account the other day, the Vancouver Bandits account, saying that they were going to be announcing players shortly. They had up to 10 players. They were just trying to fill out the rest of the roster, and they were going to start rolling some of that out. So, to me, Calgary's also been one of those teams that should be able to get players, and so I'm really surprised that they haven't been able to at least announce anything yet. Doesn't mean they don't have anybody, but I'm surprised they haven't tried to announce anybody yet. So, interested to see how that all plays out, just because both of these are player development coaches and about building a culture. And so when you're the Surge, who are coming off a finals berth and you're trying to make it back to the finals, I'm not sure if that's the direction you need to be going, but maybe that's where they need to go with the situation they've been put in. So I made a comment about player acquisitions, about who had not signed, and so we're going to get right into the signings for the month. It was, again, like I said, a little bit of a busier month. We had some big names swap sides. We're going to get to the team that I think is going to be the favorite coming into the season at the end. So you're going to have to stay and wait for that. But when it comes to, again, I'm just going to say it again, teams who have not signed anybody are the Surge, the Mamba, and the Shooting Stars. None have made any sort of motion, or that I have not heard anything in terms of have they brought anybody in. Yes, no, we have no idea yet. So we're just gonna have to wait and see. But again, teams like Calgary and Scarborough should be fine. They normally bring players in pretty late. The Surge are normally a little bit earlier than this, but the Shooting Stars, like I've said a few times, they get players in late. It is what it is. They will be just fine, and normally the team that they start the year with is not the team that they end with, so it is what it is. Let's begin with one of the players who signed, as I throw the graphic up now, for the Western We're going to start with the Western Conference, and we're going to start with a player who I was quite surprised has joined the league. And so the Vancouver Bandits, like I said, Kyle Julius, head coach and GM, had made a post on the account for the Bandits saying, hey, don't worry, don't fret. I know we only have Tyree Samuel, but we're going to have some other players being announced soon. We've got some guys under contract, and we're excited for the group. And I mean, when you bring in somebody like Michael Mulder, I would be pretty excited too. So he's got 4 years of NBA experience. He's got many different years of G League experience. I played on the Warriors. He was a rotational piece for them. He's a your traditional 3-and-D player. He plays really good defense. He can hit some open shots. Now that's at least at the NBA level. I'm sure his skill level is a little bit better than that, and they're looking to pair him with Tyrese Samuel, and I think that guard big combo might be one of the best in the league going into next year. So I'm curious to see how they build around those two. I would assume Mulder will want the ball in his hands quite a bit. Obviously, Samuel is going to need it in his hands quite a bit. And again, we don't know if Mitch Creek is returning. He's made the comment that obviously at the end of the season he wasn't. Then later he said he might, but probably not this year. So we'll see. If you put Mitch Creek in that's a really good team, but that's also, again, lots of mouths to feed, and you can't always guarantee that just because you have all the best players does not mean you're going to be able to share the ball enough to do so, but we'll see. Mulder and Samuel pick and rolls are going to be super fun this summer. Team number 2 in the West, we'll quickly just start with the Winnipeg Sea Bears. So they made 2 other announcements this month for each of 2. So a player who's had not really too much experience in the league. He's had a few stops in Edmonton, played a few minutes there. He's an energy big. I'm not sure how much time he gets. I'm assuming this is more of a development play from new head coach Mike Rainbow to try to bring in a big that maybe will compete with the likes of Simon Hildebrand, who we'll get to in a minute. But more of a guy who just rebounds, plays really hard, plays good defense. He's athletic. That's really as much as you're going to get, but that means that I'm wondering if maybe they're bringing in Chatu because they're not sure if Kyler Filowich, who I would assume would also return as being a Winnipegger and also having a really good winter season, is coming right away. So it might be Chatu's job to just fill that gap until Filowich joins, and then maybe that's where they make the handoff. But we'll have to wait and see. I'm not sure how much run Chatu's going to get. When it comes to Hildebrand, so he spent the last 2 years in the NCAA. He won back-to-back CEBL Development Player of the Year awards. He was one of the best young players in the league while he was at the University of Manitoba, and then he transferred down south to High Point University, and then played this last year at Washington State University. And it hasn't been a great tour of the U.S. for Simon. It's been okay. It's not been, I think, what he had hoped it was going to be. I think just it's a different game down there, right? They play by different rules. It's a different style of play. I think Simon benefits better from the FIBA style of play, and obviously we saw he benefited a lot from playing at the CEBL level in terms of just I thought his game was elevated there. Obviously he looked good for the Bisons at U of M, but I just thought that in the CEBL his role and the way that he was used up here was a little bit better managed than it was down in the States. So we'll see if he can regain that form. That would be fantastic. Now, moving on to the Stingers and the last team that we're going to talk about in the Western Conference. We'll begin with Tay Donald. So he's one of my favorite young players in the league. He's a guy, he's not going to make too many mistakes. He plays good defense. He can shoot the 3-ball. He's just a very solid all-around guard, and he's had a really good season overseas as his first year pro in the winter season at least. So I'm really excited to see how he does with the Stingers and Jordan Baker. Jordan Baker's super high on him. I would assume that he played, I think it was about 16 to 18 minutes a night last year. I would think he probably still comes off the bench for Coach Jordan Baker, but I would think he has a much bigger role, and I think the Stingers are going to need it with who they've lost. So it's a chance for Donald to really make a statement and show that he's one of the better young Canadians in the CEBL. Emmanuel Bandamel, just your typical shooter. He played for was the Saskatchewan Rattlers, now Saskatoon Mamba. That was 2 years ago, though. He's a shooter. He can play some defense. Nothing too crazy. It's what Jordan Baker likes to have on the roster. He likes to have a whole bunch of shooters out on the floor, guys that are able to play defense against multiple different positions. They can switch. They can guard whoever. So he's a bigger guard that can shoot. I think that's a plus. He may start. He did start for the Rattlers, but that was a Rattlers team that was not very good. So I would assume again he and Donald I think would command the bench unit, and I think that would be a pretty good bench unit if I'm Jordan Baker. I'd be pretty happy with that. Now on to the third signing of the window for the Stingers. It was Mason Boursier. So not a great 2025 for Boursier. It's been up and down the last 2 years pro for him in the CEBL. 2024 he thought he was going to get a big role with the Seabears when he signed there. He didn't. He was promised that same role, and what it was actually supposed to be in 2025, it was even more diminished than 2024, and so he asked for his release and he joined the Stingers. He and Donald presumed a bunch of the guard duties. Donald didn't start too many games, but he and Boursier played quite a bit off the bench. Even though Boursier started, he normally would man the bench unit. Boursier can handle the ball. He can shoot. He can defend. That's pretty much all you're going to get out of him in terms of what Jordan Baker's going to ask of him. I think he can do a little bit more. I think he's a little bit more athletic. He's creative with the basketball. He can find his teammates. I just don't know if any team is really going to allow him and really give him a chance to just unlock all of his skills and put it all out there to try to try to showcase that he can do a little bit more than that. I think he would be really fun in a more up-pace, fast offense that likes to run and gun. He loves to get up and down the floor. He'll grab a rebound and go. I just don't know with the Stingers, which I think is still a good spot for him because he can still run the offense, and I would again assume that he'll probably be the bench point guard. I just don't know if it's the best fit for him. Now, with the Western Conference out of the way, now it's time to throw up the graphic for the Eastern Conference, and we will begin with the Montreal Alliance, who just made the one signing. They brought in Kevin Osawe, the big man. He had some up and down play last year in the CEBL. He's had a really good winter season this past year overseas. Hasn't shot the ball very well. He likes to step outside, but he's been really good rebounding and somewhat decent, pretty decent finishing around the rim. And so I think that he will still have a role with the Alliance. I'm just not sure if it's any bigger than it was last year. But yeah, he's a guy that finishes around the rim. He plays in the paint, and he can defend. He's a pretty decent defender. So I think it's not a big piece, but it's a pretty important piece for Montreal to bring back again. Lots of these teams are trying to keep continuity in terms of their Canadians and their role players, so it's good that a chunk of these teams are bringing back guys that are familiar with their systems. And obviously we were talking about coaches. As far as I'm aware, Jermaine Small, he's one of my favorite coaches in the league, is returning with the Alliance this year. There's been no notion that the Alliance are changing head coaches this year, so that's a positive sign. So if you can keep the same head coach, keep a chunk of a roster that was really good last year, right? They've already brought back Quincy Guerrier. I think Montreal is on their way to doing some damage in the conference. Now, moving on to the Ottawa Blackjacks. They bring in two more Canadians, guys that were more bench players in Shakur Daniel and Christian Roller. When it comes to Roller, again, kind of like Osawe, he doesn't have the ability to step out and shoot the ball like an Osawe can. He's more of a traditional inside the paint big. He's just going to kind of play around the rim on both ends. He's going to play some good defense, protect the hoop. He'll finish around the bucket. Again, he's like most of the other signings that Ottawa's made. It's kind of just role players and important role players that you bring back. They've been with the organization for more than a few years. They know the system and they know everything, so it's not a big change. Again, same goes with Shakur Daniel. He's a guard defender. He normally takes on the assignment of the other team's best player. He struggled scoring the ball, so hopefully we see an uptick there, but again, he's more of just a defender that goes out and does his job, and he starts most games for Ottawa because they just need to throw somebody on the opposing team's best player, and he does a really good job of taking away touches and eliminating that player from the game. Then their third signing was a one of the only Americans that we will see so far in the window was Justin Harmon. So a guard. He's currently playing, or he was playing the last 2 years for the G League Salt Lake City Stars. Had averaged 12 points and 4 rebounds, and he shoots pretty well from three. And he has a connection with new head coach Justin Mazzulla. So it seems like most of the time when these coaches who are G League coaches bring in their G League guys, it's because they have belief that this is either a guy that they want to keep developing and see them the following year with their G League club having a bigger role, and so they want to test them out here, or it's because they think that this is a guy who can take their game to the next, use this summer to take it to the next level, and they want to help them out. So again, I'm really curious to see how he does. The Americans are always interesting because they don't play by FIBA rules, so you never know what you're going to get from them. Now, moving on to the Niagara River Lions, they bring in 3 of 4 guys that are pretty familiar with the organization in Elijah Lufile, Nathan Kayo, and TJ Law. Lufile won a title last year with the club, so did Kayo, and Law won the championship back in 2024. He took 2025 off from the CEBL. Lufile is just a big, he plays around the rim, he's like a Christian Roller, defends the paint, he rebounds, he scores inside. That's all you're going to get, but he's super steady. You can always count on him. I think it's a pretty good tidy piece of business by the River Lions. Nathan Kayo, he's one of the best two-way players in the league. He can get you a bucket on one end, whether that be at the rim. He can shoot the three. He can score off the bounce. And then he's one of the better perimeter defenders, and he can also defend the post being a forward. So, again, just tidy piece of work from Niagara, bringing him back, making sure he doesn't leave, and again, keeping the continuity. Law has not been in the league for technically 2 seasons. He won the title in 2024. It's been a struggle for him professionally the last few years, so I think he's hoping that going to a more a situation that he's more familiar with, where he can try to elevate his game and secure that winter contract for the 2026-2027 season, I think is a must for him. Again, forward, he can defend. He's not as good of a defender as Kyle, but he can defend guards or forwards. He can score inside. The jumper's hit or miss, but it's okay. So again, he's just a two-way guy that you can throw between the 3 and the 4, and he's just super versatile. He and Kyle are 2 of the more versatile players in the league. Now, their 4th signing was J.D. Muila, who actually was signed back in, I believe it was either 2024 or 2025. If you haven't seen my article from from last week, where I talked about it, that was last week, the week of the March 28th signings. He had initially signed with the Ottawa Blackjacks only to be released before the season started, so he never actually got to play a minute with the Blackjacks. So now joining the River Lions, I think he and Lufile, he can learn a lot from Lufile. He again is a big, just plays in the paint. He's not a jump shooter. So I think that he can learn a lot from Lufile, and I'm wondering if this is the River Lions saying, hey, you can come in, learn from Lufile. You guys play a similar style of basketball, and you have a similar skill set, and so we're going to get you to learn from him, and then it's going to be your front court spot going forward, because Lufile is getting on the older side. So again, the River Lions just bring in a whole bunch of players that are familiar with each other, keeping continuity, looking to go for the three-peat in 2026. And now we get to the final team, who might be the most fun to talk about so far this offseason, and we're 2 months into free agency, is the Brampton Honey Badgers. So I talked about how they need to have a big free agency period here. Obviously, they brought back Prince Oduro. They steal Danilo Juricic from the Scarborough Shooting Stars, and so it was put up or shut up for them going into the offseason. It was, are they going to get enough talent to be competitive? They need to be competitive. They haven't been competitive for 2 seasons, and boy, did Leonard Asper make sure that this team's going to be competitive. So they steal 2 players from the Edmonton Stingers, and one of the and arguably one of the and probably one of the best players in the league, if not, you can say is the best if you thought he was snubbed. And also you say you take another player from one of the Alberta teams, who is probably the second best player on his team. So we'll start with Keon Ambrose Hilton, big man who played for the Stingers last year. He, a guy that I was really fond of. One of the better Canadians to play in the league last year. Averaged 14 and 8. He started every game. He was an All-Canadian. And he scores really well around the rim. I believe it was around 64% from the floor, which was fantastic. And he's having another good year overseas in Belgium. So I think I'd said it on March 7th when they announced this signing that this was a good building block. And yeah, so you bring in one of the best Canadian bigs. Arguably, he and Samuel were 2 of the best bigs. I think Samuel was probably the best Canadian big, and Hilton was a pretty good second place. And then you pair him up with Jameer Nelson Jr., who was the Defensive Player of the Year last year, and I believe he was an All CEBL teamer. I believe he was a second teamer. Like, wow. I was very surprised they were able to pry him away from Calgary, and I wonder if it had to do with Caleb Canales, who was a G League guy and had connections to Greg Brown, who Brown and Nelson were pretty tight last summer. They were the dynamic duo for the Surge, so I'm wondering if Canales not coming back, potentially Brown not coming back, that meant that Jameer Nelson was looking to make some waves, and make some waves he did. Now, the third and final player is the MVP runner-up from last year from the Edmonton Stingers, and Sean East, who made it was kind of a sly comment, but he meant it now. We know that during the NBA All-Star break that he said that, yeah, no, I'm probably thinking about, I'm thinking about coming back to CBL, but he was having a fantastic year in the G League. I thought that he showed that he could do some stuff in the G League in 2024, 2025. And then last summer, he really showed that he's a really good player in a league full of guys who are eligible to play in Summer League and in the G League, so technically against his peers. And then he's had another really good season in the G League, so I kind of thought that he wasn't going to need to play in the CBL, but clearly he wants to. I wonder if he and Nelson are buddies. I'm not sure. I'm just going to assume that if they want to play together, because that's arguably already probably I don't know if anybody's going to beat that backcourt. That might be the best backcourt in the league, and we're not even through free agency. I'm going to stamp that right there. They're already the best backcourt. Obviously, I didn't talk about it too much, but Nelson he's not a great shooter, but he can shoot a little bit. He's really athletic. He can really get to the rim. And I talked about him being Defensive Player of the Year. East, he's also super athletic, but he's not the jumpy athletic that Nelson is. He's just the quick twitch athletic. He can really shoot it from deep. He can pass. He's a really good playmaker. He can run your offense. He's a special guard, man. And putting those two together, having East at the 1 and Nelson at the 2, because Nelson played a lot of the 1 last year for the Surge, but he can play off ball. I think that's the special thing of it. So it means East can still play on ball, Nelson can play off ball, and those two can be on the floor at the same time, which I think is a pretty special thing. I think that's going to be one of the, if not the best backcourt duo in the league. I think it might rival the Mulder-Samuel duo that I talked about earlier in the show. I think that's probably going to be the best duo, because I just think that they complement each other really well. All right, so that is it for everything for this month in terms of signings, coaching changes, any other news in the league. Let me know down in the comments. If you're watching the YouTube video, obviously you would have seen the graphics that were getting thrown up. So whenever I say I'm throwing up a graphic, if you're listening to the podcast, it's for the YouTube video. So obviously go check out the YouTube video so you can see all the graphics and such. But yeah, that is it for this episode. I'm going to have some more content. Again, if you're watching YouTube, please come like and subscribe. Obviously, if you're listening on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, please follow along. On YouTube, we're going to have some more content coming. Obviously, I talked about the draft video. I've got a whole bunch of other content coming up for the rest of the month. And then obviously we'll be back in a month for the April update. So thank you very much. And we will see you next time. Peace.